So I think we're
Mhm.
losing that art of connection, of maybe getting something wrong and then working through that with another person, another safe nervous system. We're becoming too isolated.
Helen Marie is an integrative psychotherapist, trauma specialist, author, and the creator behind Helen Marie on Instagram, where she shares daily insights that make you stop, breathe, and reflect.
We need community to heal, to feel fulfilled. We do need other people.
She's also the author of Choose You, Gentle Words That Help You Heal and Grow. What is the nicest compliment you've ever received?
Oh gosh.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Do Tell Relationship Podcast. Today, I get to really get into my therapist bag, which I love to do, because we're going to have Helen Marie on the podcast. She's an integrative psychotherapist. You might know her from social media. She has quite a great social media following. And I just can't wait to talk about today's topics. A lot of it talks about and surrounds the holidays. As we gear up, it's October. We're going into Halloween, which has become, I guess, an official holiday in my house, which I don't understand. Growing up, we did not celebrate Halloween. It was just, we would go trick-or-treating and put a costume on. It's become this huge production. I think thanks to my children and their school probably really goes all out. So we treat it like an official holiday in the Westbrook household. We have Thanksgiving coming up. We have Christmas or Hanukkah or New Year's, all the celebrations happening. And with the holidays comes a lot of excitement and fun and family time, but also there's a little bit of stress. There could be a lot of old habits and environmental distractions and challenges, a lot of trauma resurfacing. So I think Helen Marie is the perfect guest to have on at this point in the season. And I can't wait for you guys to hear what we have to chat about. Helen's approach to therapy is all about connection to your body, your emotions, and your relationships. She has such a gift for translating complex ideas about trauma, attachment, and nervous system regulation into everyday language that feels compassionate and doable. I'm so excited to have Helen on the podcast today. We're going to talk about boundaries, healing, and how to really create a space where we keep our hearts open while protecting our hearts at the same time. Helen, welcome to the show. Helen, thank you so much for joining us on my podcast, Do Tell Podcast. I'm so honored and thrilled to have you. I've been a longtime fan, so it's nice to have you in my space. And I'm looking forward to our chat today.
Oh, Nina, it's absolute pleasure. Honestly, I was so looking forward to meeting you. So thank you for inviting me on. I'm a huge fan of yours too.
Thank you. That's really kind. So we were just talking about the fact that you listen to the podcast, which I love. We always start every podcast with this segment called Walk Away or Walk Through It, so that our audience can get to know, and myself can get to know a little bit more about you. So we're going to jump into that now. Are you ready?
Okay, yeah, I love this.
Okay, here we go. So you set a boundary with a client around after hours texts, and they continue to ignore it. Walk away or walk through it.
Oh, this is therapist hat. I'd have to
It
walk
is.
through
It is.
it.
This
I'd
is a
have to
really
walk
spicy
through.
question, right? For
Yeah, it's really
therapists.
difficult because there's part of me that goes, no, there's a boundary, but I'd have to work. I'd have to walk through it. I would have
Mm-hmm.
to, because
Mm-hmm.
the therapist part of, and also the compassionate part of myself would also be thinking, what's going on here? This is giving me a lot more information. I need to hold this
Mm-hmm.
carefully. But I couldn't just ignore it. I would have to say something like, can we pick this up in session? This would
Mm-hmm.
be good to pick up on in session. But that's a really difficult first question.
I know. It's so funny. When I first read it, I was like, oh, this is a controversial question, honestly, I feel like, as a therapist, because, you want to model the behavior that we want our clients to have, but we also therapy and the therapeutic space is such a learning, like you're kind of learning on the job when you're in therapy, right? And so modeling, healthy boundaries is great, but also there's this gray area and this nuance that always has to be considered in these types of situations. So it's tricky.
And you're right, as you were speaking then, I was thinking, yes, because so nuanced and so many different scenarios I'm kind of working through in my head. But there would become a time when there could be a limit, but then also considering safety. And so it's a
Mhm.
really difficult one, really difficult one.
Mhm. Mhm.
The only thing I'm thinking about is risk. And I suppose
Mhm.
I'm thinking just holding an awareness of that. Um,
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. Okay, so here's a good one. A family member vents nonstop every time you talk, but never ask how you are. Walk away or walk through it.
They're so tough, aren't they? I'm thinking about popping that beautiful bubble boundary around myself and
Mhm.
just almost not allowing it in. And then
Mhm.
almost being in the space, but not really in the space, if that makes sense. And then
It does
thinking
make
about
sense.
how I need to really strengthen my boundaries with this
Mhm.
person. So I'm thinking I would probably come to a I'd probably this is really tough because the therapist part of me wants to say, I'd walk through it and say, I'm here to listen. But there comes a limit where you matter too, doesn't there? And how much capacity have you got for that? So,
Mhm.
okay, I'm leaning more towards walk through.
Okay.
Walk through,
Walk
check they're
through it.
okay. Walk
But
through it.
it's the our relationships as therapists, right? It's so interesting because how often is it that people, whether they're family, friends, or whomever, strangers even, will come up to you and like start disclosing all of this information about their lives. And they like it's like there's this tendency for people to in open up to you because I feel like that happens to me quite often. And I think it's something about the safeness, I think, around it, and also just your demeanor and how calm and inviting and your tone and all of those things that allow people to feel kind of safe being vulnerable and disclosing all this information. So I feel like this is a very accurate depiction of things that happen to us as therapists in our everyday life. And it is tricky to be like, I don't really want to have a session right now with you.
I know. And it's making me think that all of our relationships can be so different, can't they? But we
Mhm,
couldn't have too many of those relationships in our life because if all of the relationships around us were like that, we just wouldn't have any room or capacity, would we, for them? So I
mhm,
think it's looking at, okay, so could I cope with maybe 30% of my relationships being like that and I could walk through them? But if it was the other way around, 70% of relationships in my life were it was that all the time, I think I'd have to think, maybe I'm doing something wrong and I need to walk away so that I'm not so available all the time for this. That's a tricky one.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so this is really good. I'm gonna do one more
Yeah.
because I think it's important for people to, I think it'll be helpful for a lot of people in our audience. So you open up to a friend about something heavy and they change the subject. Walk away or walk through it.
Walk away.
Yeah.
Walk away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always wrestle with this because I feel like sometimes people don't quite have the language and the patience, or they have their own thing going on to where they're not able to really receive hard, like, emotions, challenging emotions and feelings. And I feel like people often ask me, well, what do I say when you ask someone how they're doing and then they like tell you the truth about how they're doing and it's not so pretty and like it's
Yeah.
not I'm fine or happy. Like, what do you do in that moment? And I always say, that I think the best thing that you can do is just listen. Sometimes people just need to say it out loud to someone else, and that can be helpful to them. And then always asking, a follow-up question of like, what can I do to support you, or how can I help you through this? Is a perfect like just answer when you don't know what to say, right?
I know, and you're so right, because so when I say about walking away, what I mean is that I wouldn't reach out to that person again with my story. I wouldn't leave the
Mm-hmm.
friendship, but I think,
Mm-hmm.
okay, this is not my safe space to go
Mm-hmm.
to talk about something I'm struggling with. So I wouldn't push it. I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
try and get that person to hear me, get that person to be my supportive space.
Mm-hmm.
I would think, okay, I need to look somewhere else for someone to support me here. So that
And
kind
that's
of walking
exactly
away.
the context.
Yeah.
That's exactly the context that I meant. Like
Oh, good.
that is for me, like I would walk away from that as well. And I would also raise an eyebrow.
Yeah.
um, because I think that there can be a lot of underlying emotions and things that haven't quite hit the surface yet, but that kind of behavior, that dismissive kind of overlooking your feelings and emotions can be very problematic in a relationship. So totally walking away from that. But I
Yeah.
do know that sometimes people, there can be instances, maybe not in a close relationship or an intimate relationship, where someone just doesn't know what to do, and they kind of like clock out and like, you know. So there's both instances, I suppose. Well, but for sure, if someone's ignoring my like deep dark thing that I opened up and was vulnerable about sharing, like I'm getting out of there really quickly.
I know, except Nina, except if that was your partner on repeat, I think I'd have to walk through it and say, like,
Oh,
hang
well,
on a minute,
yes. Well, of course. I
I would
mean,
like to think that they were there for me.
exactly. That's then in that case, we'll hear them out a little bit. Okay, that was really fun. I feel like that was so deep. And
Hmm.
it's so funny because I can like see our brains working and thinking of all of these things as therapists and trying to consider all of the information that's not there because we're so used to gathering all the information so that we can make insightful or informed connections and things like that. So this is like I feel like this is was tricky for me.
I think it's tricky as a therapist, isn't it? I wonder, I'd love to know what my non-therapist self would do, but I don't have access to. You know?
Exactly. Okay, great. So this is a good segue, I feel like, because there's so many different forms of therapy, right? I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. We focus on, relationships, interpersonal and intrapersonal relationships. And I feel like as a psychotherapist is very, very different, right? Can you share um, a little bit more about your choice to go into psychotherapy and who would be like an ideal client to consider or pursue psychotherapy?
Oh, gorgeous question. Gorgeous question. Um, Psychotherapy, I suppose it brings in the psychoanalytical lens and layer too. So we go back a lot. Not obviously not straight away. We don't say, tell me about your childhood, but it's
Mhm,
about really understanding the person from a developmental point of view, from what was their upbringing like, their family, their attachment. So we look very closely at the neurobiology of attachment and how the brain has been shaped by those early experiences, and particularly between 0 and 7. And what I find is that the clients I work with who come from, all different backgrounds, from all the years and the clients I've worked with, the kind of client base I'm looking at are people who are struggling to understand themselves, struggling with anxiety, struggling with feeling lost, struggling with various aspects of themselves. And psychotherapy helps them understand why they might be struggling, as opposed to those people who don't seem to be struggling. So we're looking very much through the lens of insecure attachment versus secure attachment, and
Mhm.
also looking at that through the lens of trauma and childhood trauma. So the work that I really focus on is very much around relational trauma, developmental trauma, generational trauma. Although
Mhm.
I do single event trauma as well, but a lot of my and PTSD, but a lot of my work is more around complex PTSD. Nina, I also work with couples, and what I love about using psychotherapy with working with couples is people understanding their partner. And very often, as you would know, we only see our relationship through our own lens, don't we?
Mhm.
And I remember once, and I have permission to share this story because I shared it in my book, but I remember once working with a client um, who was very close to breaking up with her partner because they were incredibly emotionally unavailable for them.
Mhm.
And so I love to work with clients about understanding that partner. And we talked a bit about her partner's background. And he'd lost his mum when he was very young, and he was raised by his grandmother. And obviously, his father was going through immense grief. And so he was raised without that emotional availability from the caregivers around him, growing up in a
Mhm.
grief setting. And we talked about partner possibly being very emotionally unavailable or avoidant or not able to touch that vulnerable wound. The session completely pivoted.
Mhm.
And my client at the end of the session said, I don't want to break up with him. I need to call him. I need to open my arms and hear his story. I had never thought about it from what he's not available to be able to give me. So I always feel that's a good example of how psychotherapy helps you see the other, but also understand yourself too.
Mhm. And you talk about this, I feel like in all of your platforms and how trauma can resurface in unexpected ways. You touched a little bit about on PTSD. And that PTSD gets talked about so much, but I think so many people still see it as something that only happens in these major catastrophic events. When in reality, it can stem from many things just showing up quiet and can show up quietly in so many different ways, especially when we're back in familiar environments around people and places, right? Tied to the past experiences and dysfunctional patterns. So, how do you see PTSD showing up in people's everyday lives, particularly around the holidays when those triggers can feel harder to avoid?
Well, I think it's that I work very somatically, Nina. So I think it's about people understanding their nervous system
Hmm.
and understanding their nervous system works in really magic and strange ways beneath the surface. And it's going on before the mind has even been able to give meaning to the sensations. And I think it's really wonderful to understand that our first language was sensations, it wasn't words.
Hmm.
And we
Hmm.
learn, the body learns how to experience what's going on around us. So I think when we get back into situations like holidays and families, those old wounds can come back in sensations first of all.
Hmm.
And the body might react in kind of, it braces, it's tense, as in therapy speak, it's gone into sympathetic, it's gone into fight flight, or it might have gone into its dorsal shutdown. So either the world doesn't feel kind or safe, or the world feels quite hopeless. And what
Hmm.
happens is the mind doesn't think, or the body doesn't think, sorry, the nervous system doesn't think, what's a healthy option to choose here? It just
Hmm.
repeats a pattern of what it did last time. What did I do last time to get me through this? So it just goes
Hmm.
back to that old pattern, whether it's shut down, whether it's silent treatment, whether it's stropping, whatever it is, unhealthy habits, whatever it is, your nervous system just repeats patterns until your cognitive gives meaning to what is the nervous system going through right now? Can I
Mhm.
listen to my body? Can I understand what it's doing and almost give meaning to it? So I work very psychoanalytically, but incredibly somatically as well.
I really like that. It's kind of what you're saying is like there's this has to have we have to have this cognitive override almost to this natural reaction that our body has when we're placed back in these traumatic environments or in these environments, just old environments in general. And so what type of advice or how do you actually accomplish that? Because these can be really strong reactions. And a lot of the time, it's hard for us not to settle back into the comfort or the environment and kind of adapt to that when we're placed in that, like going home for the holidays.
Mhm.
So like how would you suggest like what's one thing that we could do when we're entering these spaces, maybe before and during and even after, that could help us assist us with that cognitive override when we're kind of thrusted back into that physical um reaction in that environment.
Yeah, I think a couple of things come to mind, and the first one I'll talk about is understanding that you are going back into a situation where your nervous system might be dysregulated. So it might
Mhm.
go into your fight or flight, and I put my hand on my chest here. I look at Deb Dana's polyvagal ladder system here and about
Mhm.
popping the ladder on my body. And the middle rung is the sympathetic, your fight flight. So acknowledging that you could be going into fight flight or into that lower rung, the gut, the dorsal shutdown. So even
Mhm.
just having an awareness, my body's gone into dysregulation or
Mhm.
it might go into dysregulation.
Mhm.
The magic is when we remember we have the top rung of the ladder, which is I always put my hand on
Mhm.
my chest. And this is accessing our ventral energy. And when we just pop our hands here and either tap it gently or circle or just hold and take a deep breath, just allows us to come back to our ventral energy, which is our safe energy, which
Mhm.
allows our executive functions of our brain to work optimally. I know this all sounds quite scientific, but if you just, if people just imagine that if I touch my chest here, it allows my brain to work optimally and it allows me to come out of fight flight. It allows me to come out
Mm.
of survival mode. So by touching here, breathing deeply, I come out of survival mode.
Mhm.
And then once you're out of survival mode, I would say bring in the second element, which is remind yourself you are not a child, you are an
Mm.
adult. I know.
Mhm.
And so many of us fall back into child self. So just reminding ourselves in that moment that we're our adult self. And in a way, I work here almost with differentiation, Nina, as you will in trauma work. And
Mhm.
that I'm not a child, I'm an adult, it's 2025. And just talk through your adultness to yourself.
Mhm.
And it just moves you into a different state where you're not in that system that feels like a child or feels activated. You've come back to
Mhm.
calm adult self, if you can access that calm adult self.
I think that's so important, and the first step to me is the really difficult, um, thing to come to understand, which we have so much time, which is that awareness, right? I think that it's really hard to do something differently or step outside of a system when we are not aware of that system and how it impacts us individually. So I always talk about, um, managing your expectations around something and going into environments or into offices or meetings or whatever the case may be with the understanding that there are many possibilities and outcomes that can happen and just staying open to whatever that is and knowing that you have the tools which are
Yeah.
very simple easy tools to um, re to bring in that cognitive functioning piece and override our body's physical reaction to those difficulties. So I think that that's really great and very useful. You keep talking about our child um, like selves, or we've mentioned a few times developmentally how important it is, and how we respond as adults to what has happened to us or the experiences that we had when we were a child. And you mentioned an age range. It was what, 2 to 7, between ages 2 and 7.
Yeah, 0 to 7. I kind of, yes, yes.
0 to 7,
Mm.
exactly. So I think from a parental standpoint, it's so funny because every time I hear that, I'm like, it's a huge reminder to me, and this is something that I already know, but it's a testament to the intentionality that it takes when raising children, especially for me, to really be on top of how I am modeling behavior, the messages that I'm sending them, the things that I'm teaching them. And my kids are, 6. I have 2 6-year-old girls and an 8-year-old. And knowing just how impactful these first years of their life are has been really important to my parenting, my husband's parenting. But for those of us who hear that and we panic and we're maybe a little concerned, like, well, what was the lessons? How did my child learn to be attached? Like, was their attachment style, a healthy attachment style? Is it something that's going to come back as they get older and really cause them a lot of pain or stress or trauma in their lives? So, what would you say to people who are just kind of gaining that awareness and that understanding about how these young years for children are so crucial, and what can they do to help um, facilitate the kind of emotional growth and learning and safety that is required before we become adults and start looking back and noticing how our childhood has negatively impacted us in so many ways.
It's so hard being a parent, isn't
I
it? It's
know.
so hard because particularly in today's world where you have access to so much information, which is also brilliant because you can learn and absorb so much, but there's also so much that you can get consumed by or over consumed by.
Mhm.
And but one thing I would say is that I would imagine that anyone listening to your podcast is someone that's interested in self development, self
Mhm.
work, self understanding. So they're bringing a different energy when they're
Mhm.
listening to this podcast because they're already interested in it. So I would say to anyone listening that has got small children and they've heard what we've said and they're like, oh, am I ruining my children? There's a beautiful, I know because I've done it as well. And my children are so much older now, but I think one of the most beautiful concepts too, there's one, Winnicott's words of good enough parenting, which I think is really beautiful to hold that awareness of that. But I
Mhm.
also think that that wonderful concept of rupture and repair, it's never too late to do the
Mhm.
repair work.
Mhm.
I've had some instances in my own life with my children and things going on around mental health that have been incredibly difficult. Um, and just managing 3 children growing up and all of their emotions, but knowing that I might not always have got it right. But
Mhm.
even as a therapist, even, we get it wrong. But
Mhm.
having the awareness that, okay, what can I do to make this better? What can I do? Where's my agency that I could help repair this? Because that shows it matters to me. That
Mhm.
person matters to me. You know, owning your part in it, but also taking the lead in that repair. Because so often, so often, people don't remember the rupture, they remember the repair work. Their nervous system remembers that was so beautiful to feel safe again with that person.
Mhm.
So I know so many parents who have lost it with their children, who have come to me for advice. And I've said, the child will remember the safety you create and the
Mhm.
putting your hand up and saying, I was overwhelmed. There was a lot going on for me, but that was wrong. I apologize. I'm going to make this better for us. And then honoring that. So that just holding that notion of rupture and repair and just how much repair can help.
I really love that because I think as a parent, um, I think this is where we kind of get a little hand up, is this idea of unconditional love. And our children, I feel, are always going to be seeking the good. They are like craving the good and the love and the nurturing, and they want that constantly and consistently from their parents. So the way you phrase that, is that they're going to remember the repair over the rupture. It makes a lot of sense because that's what they're seeking. They don't want the rupture. They only want the repair. And so if you put forth the energy and the effort and the time into the healing and the work, and like you said, taking the lead on the repair, I think that it's nice to know that there's always a space and there's always going to be um, an opportunity to repair. And I think that's important for a lot of people because everybody makes mistakes, and people want to know and feel comfort in the idea that there's a way to fix things. And I often think, like, for me in my own life, I think I've been raising this little son who is quite he's quite orderly and organized, and um a tad bit like type A, I want to say, a little bit of a perfectionist, and thinking that his parents are so amazing and great. Um and a lot of the homework that we received as parents when working with parenting coaches and all the information that we're seeing is like, make mistakes and do it in front of the kids, and then apologize and talk about it and mirror the fact that yes, we're not perfect, we're going to make mistakes, so that they get that out of their mind really quickly, that there are perfect humans out here and we need to thrive for that. So I think, again, there's this instance of the repair being the focus rather than the rupture.
Yeah. I love that because it's about us understanding or teaching our children that it's safe to be human. It's safe
Hmm.
to be vulnerable. It's safe to make mistakes. If they
Hmm.
see us always being so perfect, that's incredibly hard to strive for, isn't it? So that
Hmm.
vulnerability with our children really matters. Really
Hmm.
matters. I love that
Absolutely.
advice. Love that.
Okay, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit and I'm going to talk about this idea floating around. I think you're the perfect person to kind of share
Okay.
your thoughts on this, that this generation is too self-focused. Like, it's all about me. I feel like there's this really big push between the collective, like what's the greater, what should we do for the greater good, or what's
Mm,
collectively best for all of
mm.
us versus choosing yourself. And do you think that people misunderstand that and what it really means to choose yourself and see that as something being selfish? How do you think that we can kind of care for ourselves and still show up for our community at the same time?
Yeah, I think that's such a brilliant question. And it's something I've been thinking about a lot in my own recent podcasts, actually, and I'm noticing it a lot within my community, that we're becoming incredibly self-focused
Mhm.
and boundaried. And everything's around boundaries, 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 which I'm
Mhm.
not saying shouldn't be there, but I think the language has become incredibly stiff. You can see my
Yes.
body language. I'm like, oh, I want to loosen up, And And what I really feel, Nina, is by becoming so self-focused, I think people are actually finding that they're not finding happiness.
Mhm.
And I'm doing all this work. I'm doing all this work. I'm doing everything that they tell me to do. Why don't I feel happy, content? Because the
Mhm.
missing piece of the puzzle is co-regulation. And by
Mhm.
co-regulation, I mean being with other people, other safe nervous systems. We're
Mhm.
losing, we're losing the art of connection. We're losing how to be with other people because we're
Mhm.
so focused on ourselves.
Mhm.
It's almost gone too far. And I remember a story recently. I know, and I love that you're nodding your head at me. You don't think I've gone crazy here, but I
No.
remember a story recently where someone said they'd become so boundaried with their partner. The partner said, I don't know what I'm supposed to do anymore because there's so
Mhm.
many rules, and
Mhm.
we lose that flow of we need to learn what it's like, coming back to rupture, what it's like to come up against maybe a little bit of friction with another human,
Mm.
but
Mhm.
how we mend that friction, how we
Mhm.
hold space for it, learn from it, check in with the other. We can't just turn away every time there's a little bit of friction or someone's crossed a boundary. I'm not talking about boundaries where there needs to be a boundary. I'm talking about
Mhm.
general self-care
I
work that
know exactly what you're talking about.
floods about social media, not something that is incredibly, you need to protect yourself. So I think we're
Mhm.
losing that art of connection, of maybe getting something wrong and then working through that with another person, another safe nervous system. We're becoming too isolated. And although my book was called Choose You, it was actually choose you too. Choose yourself
Mhm.
like you would a friend. And
Mhm.
I think that people are just taking it to extreme
Mhm.
and are then becoming incredibly isolated, Nina. And we need community to heal. We need
Mhm.
community to feel compassion, empathy, to feel fulfilled. We do need other people.
That's I just had Dr. Raquel Martin on the podcast, and that's what she said. She said that conflict is the cost of community. She said something like that.
Okay.
And or being annoyed maybe is the cost of community. I don't remember which one, same
Yes.
difference.
Yeah.
And that has been a reoccurring theme over and over again. Anytime I talk to anyone in the mental health space, whether it be a psychotherapist, a psychologist,
Mm,
a psychiatrist, or anything um, in the realm, I think that this idea of overcorrecting is a really big issue. The blocking of and canceling of people out of your life when there is conflict. And I think that what you said was so spot on. I think that we're losing our ability to negotiate and to be uncomfortable in conflict and kind of learn how to be in community. And it is very isolating, but the problem with this idea of boundaries and setting boundaries is that people are often um, misinterpreting or misunderstanding what boundaries actually are. And they're thinking about rules and implementing rules and telling other people if they want to be a part of their life, then these are the rules that they have to abide by. Of course, that's never going to work because people are not going to be able to follow all of these rules, and then it doesn't allow for any space for grace or growth or even conversation a lot of the time. So,
it's not very fluid, is it? It doesn't flow. It's also it's almost so it's contributing to, you talked about isolation, but it's contributing to the loneliness pandemic, isn't it? Really?
mhm,
Because
mhm,
we're seeing so many lonely people now where they're
Mhm.
not able, and then that's contributing to social anxiety because people aren't out in the space mixing within their community. We see
Mhm.
such healing in community, don't we?
We do. So, well, with that being said, how do we approach boundary setting in a way that feels realistic for people? Something they can practice every day.
I think it's about looking at your limits, isn't it? And what feels safe for you and what doesn't feel safe. But also understanding that with boundaries, don't forget that there comes communication.
Mhm.
It's about communicating. It's not something that's put up between people. I think it's softer than that. It's about using your words to show that boundary. That
Mhm.
doesn't work for me, or I feel really uncomfortable with that. It's
Mhm.
using the language to give meaning or to explain the sensations in your body. And if we're in community, in a safe community, I always say to people, it's about you communicating your boundaries as you would like someone else to communicate theirs, but
Mhm.
also
Mhm.
holding other people's boundaries as you would like yours held. So it's
Wow. That's
yeah,
important.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I think it gets lost a lot of the time, and that's where this idea of, just being overly focused on the self comes in,
Yeah,
and we're not considering other people. And even when you talked about this idea of couples therapy and how just sitting and being and hearing someone else's perspective, hearing about someone else's background and why they understand life the way that they do, and why they make some of the choices that they make is so enlightening in itself. But when we're not open to hearing other people or learning about their perspective or experiences, we kind of miss that. We miss that opportunity to be vulnerable and build even more closeness through that communication.
so you're so right, and you're so right. I love that. We lose something by
Mhm.
by being so boundaried, and I think we're seeing a lot of that in the generations at the moment of they're losing so much because they're
Mhm.
so rigid in their boundaries. It's so self ego focused, me.
Mhm.
Even so, I hate even saying that because I'm sure people aren't even realizing that's what they're doing, but they're
Mhm.
losing that beautiful energy between themselves and another person. And that's how we grow, isn't it, Nina? How we are relational beings. We need to be with other people.
Absolutely. Um, I kind of want to get a little more into some of the things that you talk about often, which is, you shared about that capacity and desire aren't the same thing, right? And that someone can truly want to love us well and still not have the ability to, which I think kind of ties in. Can you talk to the difference between the two and what it means for people who are hoping, like a friend, a family member, or a partner will change or finally love them the way they need or hear them the way they need to be heard?
Yeah, I wrote a post on that recently, didn't I, on
Mhm.
Instagram about I think what it is about it's about understanding the other, isn't it? And not taking something so personally
Mhm.
and just acknowledging that they might not have the capacity to love you how you need. They might not have the awareness, the self-awareness. They might not be able to touch their vulnerability. It could feel incredibly vulnerable for them to step over that line to love you how you need. And if they've never ever felt safe being vulnerable, that can be incredibly scary to do. And I
Mhm.
I think when I think about this, I'm thinking also about love languages. And
Mhm.
I have a bit of an issue with love languages. Yes, in an ideal world, wouldn't it be wonderful to say, my love language is words of affirmation. I need to hear you say to me every day that I'm brilliant.
Mhm.
I'm gorgeous, whatever it is, I need you to do that for me. Your partner might find that incredibly difficult to have the
Mhm.
confidence to use language. They might find it much easier to use touch or
Mhm.
actions, acts of service. And I say to
Mhm.
people, look at the way someone shows their love.
Mhm.
It might not look how the way you're looking for, but look
Mm.
at the way that they show their love. It could be the check-in text. It could be the buying your favorite snack on the way home from work. It could be, I thought we could watch this movie together tonight.
Mhm.
Look for the ways they say, I love you. Look for the
Mhm.
ways that they show their love. It might not be in a really obvious way to you, but they're doing it to
Mhm.
the best that they can. And so that's why I get caught up with love languages, because if someone's is physical touch, but someone finds it way too vulnerable to touch or be intimate in a
Mhm.
moment, we have to hold
Mhm.
space for that, or at least get curious about it, or hold it with compassion, or talk to them, communicate, but as opposed to this kind of very rigid way.
Exactly. I feel like I mean, you can say until you're blue in the face that, "Oh, my love language is acts of service or words of affirmation." But when you're ignoring the other person's love language, you're not actually practicing the thing that you're preaching. If you want them to meet you where you are, you're disregarding where they are. So you got to find some place in the middle. How do I like look for the signs that and the things that they're doing to show me that they love or they care about me? And then also, asking for the thing that I need. And so maybe somewhere in the middle, there's a healthy balance where everyone feels like they are getting the thing that they need from the
Yeah.
relationship. I think, okay, so we could go on and on and on, and this has been so really wonderful to actually get to have this chat with you, but I wanted to get, um, something that the audience can really take away from this conversation and listening to you, and if everyone listening could walk away with one small mindset set shift or practice to try after hearing this conversation, what would you want that to be?
After this conversation, I think I think my main one that I'd love people to take away is to think about finding your regulated state. So coming back to your place within you that doesn't
Mhm.
feel like survival.
Ooh, I
Because
love that.
because I feel that even with the topics of conversation around capacity and love, sorry, I've got a golden retriever hair in my mouth. I can feel it. My dog,
We love golden
I can
retrievers.
feel she's molting so much at the moment, and I can feel hair. Sorry, but I feel that when you come to a place that's not survival, even the conversation we were having about relationships and capacity, if you're not in survival mode, you will handle that relationship so differently. So you won't go into attacking in your fight flight that you don't do this, you don't do that. You come from a much softer place. So I
Mhm.
would say come back to a place where you don't feel in survival, where you can access your gentler, softer side.
Mhm. And it can start with your hand on your chest. When you think about the next chapter for yourself and for your work, for the people that you help, what are you most excited about?
I love that question, Nina. And I actually get asked it quite a lot around,
Oh,
what's next?
good.
That kind of what's
Mhm.
next, or in different kind of
Mhm.
guises.
Mhm.
I I feel in a really good place. And I feel that I want to just keep doing what I'm doing with my podcast, my practice, but also my self-practice,
Mhm.
finding those moments to be able to keep myself regulated, because the ripple effect of having a regulated nervous system is so expansive. It's it's
Mhm.
it's quite beautiful.
Mhm.
So
I
that's what I'm
love that. So I love that so much because sometimes it can feel like a question that brings a lot of pressure. And I like the idea of just being comfortable and happy in the space that you're in
yeah.
and then taking it step day by day from there. I really like that and appreciate that. A lot of people have a lot of discomfort around being in that space. So I really love that. That's the takeaway.
I've worked hard to get there, Nina. So
I know
it's
it's
been a
not easy.
journey.
Trust me, I know it's not easy. But thank you so much for me, this is the type of episode that I really love. I get to put my little therapist cap on and just be like a geek, like I used to be in college, just so eager to learn more about the brain and the mind and why we do all the things that we do. But most importantly, how we kind of always come back to this idea of community and where we fit in and how we can grow and just, love and be loved. So before you leave, we played Do Tell card game. If you were here, I would let you choose your question, but since you are in the UK, I will pick for you.
Okay.
And so Oh, I like this question. Okay, so what is the nicest compliment you've ever received?
Oh gosh. Oh, that's a really difficult one, isn't it?
I know. It's the therapist in you. You can do
I
it.
I know. What's the nicest compliment I've ever received? Gosh, you've really put me on the spot. People are so lovely. I think it would I think it would come back to I can remember the one that's coming to mind, and it's about having a openness to hear
Mhm,
anyone's story. And I always have
mhm.
time for people. And I always remember someone saying that. And I thought, I always have time for people. And I'm glad that was recognized, because I would always make space for people. So yeah, that has always stayed with me.
Wonderful. Love that. Thank you so much for joining
Oh,
us. This has been wonderful.
oh, it's been so fun. It's been so beautiful to meet you. So thank you so much, Nina. Thank you.
Thank you for watching the Do Tell Relationship Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you are listening to this episode and leave us a comment as well. And lastly, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email at the dotellpodcast@gmail.com